Yes, you read the title right. I'm revisiting Lizzie Borden again. Here on Lessons from the Purple Chair. Hi, welcome back to Lessons from the Purple Chair. One intellectual's musings from the comfort of a big purple wingback. I'm your host, Professor Timothy R. Crowe. And yes, as the title said, and I said in the opening, I'm doing Lizzie Borden again. This is my third video on Lizzie Borden. Now, the last time I said, well, that's all I've got for Lizzie Borden. Well, apparently not. And the reason that I'm doing this third video is because from the last video, I got so many great comments and so many great questions that I answered that I was thinking, you know what, there's a few more perspectives and a few more questions on this case. Some of the perspectives you may have never heard before that I'd really like to go over. And so I decided to do this third, and I promise you last, Lizzie Borden video. After this, I'm done with it once and for all. Maybe. So you know what? Let's get on with it. As I was saying, I got a lot of really good questions and got into a lot of really good discussions about these murders in the comments of the last video. And, you know, it really made me start thinking about a few of the issues that I didn't bring up. And but also got a few ridiculous assertions. One particularly I have to mention was that I actually had a lady say, oh, this murder has a male hallmark all over it. Women do not murder like this. What? Did this comment come through time from the Victorian age? That was a horribly misogynistic and sexist comment. And to that, I'll say that if you do not believe that women are capable of this type of grisly, brutal murder, I'll just give you three names: Bill Guinness, Eileen Wuornos, and my favorite, Catherine Knight. Especially look up Catherine Knight. Then tell me women aren't capable of this type of grisly murder. Okay? Now, that out of the way, a lot of the comments that came out were talking about the blood and talking about the blood evidence. You know, that there was no blood on her. Nobody saw blood. And if she did it, there had to be at least some blood somewhere on her hair, her face. She couldn't have got all that blood off. Blood's hard to get off, which is very true. However, one thing I'd like to point out, and something I didn't go over in the other videos, is that we're thinking of this blood evidence from a 21st century mentality. You know, from a generation of people that are used to watching CSI and forensic files, or even the knowledge of, you know, forensic work and forensic investigation. But you have to put these murders in the time frame that they were, and in the era which was the Victorian era, right toward the end of the Victorian era, and got to think of the sensibilities and the completely different outlook that they had at the time. Also, the level of science there at the time. Now, for one, people will be like, you know, well, there had to be blood on her. You know, why didn't they find? You know, there should have been something on her. Well, you know what? There very well may have been. Even if she washed up, if you go by the theory that I give, that she may have used that coat and then took it off, and, you know, if there was some blood spatter on her face or her hands, she could have washed that off. And I agree, there may still been a little bit of blood evidence left. But folks, this was the Victorian age. For one, you know, and there's been comments made about this before. For one, if that happened today, they would make Lizzie Borden, they'd have had a female officer go with her, and they'd have stripped her down and give her an examination at a hospital, or on, you know, and they would have sent her close to a forensic lab where they had to went over it with a fine-tooth comb. You know, that didn't happen back then. There were just certain things that were not done in the Victorian era, and one was to do a body search on a lady, and not only a lady, But a woman from a good family, from a with a good reputation in the town. This was Fall River, 1892. No one, you didn't put your hands on a lady. That just didn't happen. You're talking about a society that if if a woman went to a doctor, she went with a female chaperone. If the doctor had to listen to her heart, they would have her sister or her female chaperone hold the stethoscope to her chest. The man would turn his head and listen to the heartbeat because he couldn't touch her. That just wasn't done. So there was no way any police officer coming into that room was going to be like, yeah, I need to give you a physical examination. Oh, that would have been horribly scandalous. To a group that were shocked if you wore white after Labor Day, literally, it would have been not just a faux pas, but a scandal. That's not going to happen. And on top of that, even the police, they were of this era too, and there was just certain things not done. For instance, they searched the house. They couldn't find the murder weapon. Well, here's one thing. There were some places they were never going to look, namely in the chest of drawers, because for fear that they may see the ladies' unmentionables, their slips and their panties, their bloomers. Oh, that wouldn't even been dreamed of. And actually, you say, well, you may be going a little too far here, Tim. Not really, because if you think about it, it matches with what happened. Because, for instance, we know 3 days after the crime, we have the burning of the dress incident. This dress that was covered apparently in reddish paint. Why wasn't that found when they searched the house? Where was this dress? So that right there, so that right there shows that there were certain places they just didn't look, and apparently it's in drawers where they kept their clothes. So the fact they couldn't find the murder weapon, well, Lizzie Borden could have took that axe and stuck it in her panty drawer, and nobody would have ever found it. And the thing is, she was an intelligent Victorian woman. She knew that no one was going to give her a body search. It wouldn't even went through her mind. So long as she didn't have blood dripping off her face, nobody's going to give her an examination, nor are they going to ask her to strip off her clothes. Oh my. Once again, Victorian age, 1892. That wasn't going to happen. And in fact, it was another 5 days before they even asked to see the dress she was wearing. And of course, she said sure, and she produced a beautifully laundered dress. So it could have, there could have been some bits of blood. There could have been there, but no one was going to ask a Victorian woman to strip or to give her a body exam. So that evidence very well could be there, but for the time, they was never going to find it. You got to keep that in mind. And while I'm on that, we have to talk about the police a little bit. And the fact that they didn't find the dress, when 3 days later we have her burning it, which brought on the entire trial. That's what she was tried for. That was evidence is that she burned a dress 3 days later, like she was hiding evidence. Well, that's why didn't they find this dress? Well, and why didn't they ask her to take her clothes, and for 3 days later? But also, people say, well, they didn't find the murder weapon. Well, the axe that was found, which was inconclusive as whether or not it was the actual hatchet used in the murder. Originally, when the police were searching the house, a police officer found it and put it back. Another cop coming along, another police officer coming along, found it again, and he put it into evidence. So, in these type of conditions and these type of police, it's, who knows what was missed. And, I don't really want to come down on these police officers. This was 1892. There was no fingerprint evidence at the time. There was no blood evidence or DNA or any of that. And also, these police officers, Fall River did not have major murders. They mostly dealt with, bar brawls, and maybe occasional, break-in, burglary, or prostitution. they weren't really geared. They didn't really have a homicide unit like they have today. So they was just doing the best that they could do. So, the fact they moved bodies, moved the bodies around before they took the pictures, the fact that they didn't collect the clothes for blood evidence, that they really didn't search the house very thoroughly. Not only is they a product of their time, and they weren't going to go through people's drawers, literally, and make women strip, but also there was no guideline and no experience for this type of crime. And I think we have to take that into consideration. Now, in my first video, we talked about the crime and the crime details of who was there, who wasn't. And then the second video, I really kind of knocked out of the park the whole ideas of an outside intruder coming in, whether it be a burglar come in that killed the Bordens, or that it was some sort of angered business associate or renter of Mr. Borden come in the house and kill them. I kind of showed how that just doesn't work on a lot of levels. It was between 9 and 11 in the morning, bright summer day. It was actually on a Thursday. And, with people walking up and down the streets and someone sneaking in the house and coming out without blood on them is just not feasible. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody goes robs a house at 11 o'clock in the morning with people at home. And if you're going to kill your landlord, you catch him out on the street, or you break his house at night. You don't go in with people at home middle of the day, kill his wife, and wait for him and then kill him. So I went over all that, in the last video. So I've covered anybody outside, but I got a lot of questions and a lot of assertions and beliefs from people talking about the people we know were inside the house, at least throughout that day, and saying, I think that John Morris did it. I think that Bridget Sullivan, the maid, I think that she was behind it or involved in it somehow. I even got that, hey, I think Emma's the one. I think she snuck back and killed her father. So I thought, what means I've covered outside the house, let's cover the people that were in that house that day, or that lived in that house. Okay, well, the first one I'm going to start off with was Emma Borden, just to knock it out of the way. I've actually heard a crazy theory, and it's with no support whatsoever, that she could have grabbed a horse from Fairhaven, rode the 15 miles back that morning, killed her father, then rode back to get the news, and then take a carriage back. That's just ridiculous. She was staying with friends. Everyone knew she was out of town. And this is not like she had a race car, folks, to run up there, kill her. And once again, nobody saw her return. She'd had return on this horse or in a buggy. Nobody saw her come back. Nobody saw her come around. This 42-year-old woman that lived in the house, pull up. Nobody noticed her buggy. They noticed Bridget running out of the house, this few minutes after murder. They didn't see this buggy or this horse of her charging up and then charging out. This has no basis in fact whatsoever, nor in logic. So, and there was testimony, there was support that everyone knew that Emma was staying with some friends in Fairhaven, 15 miles away. So of all people to be suspected, she has the most rock-solid alibi. She was not even in town. That's really grasping at some illogical straws. Now, the other one, I hear this a lot. Oh, well, I think it was John Morris. It's very odd that he just happened to show up the night before, and he didn't have any luggage and all of that. Well, I do think that that's odd, and that he showed up that particular day. It doesn't seem like, from what I've read, it doesn't seem like this was a planned visit. However, looking at his history, and he's a little bit of a mysterious person anyway, we don't know a lot about him, this was not odd for him. He had been known to pop up at the house before. Now this, whether or not he had luggage, whether he brought a bag with him, I really haven't been able to confirm one way or the other. But from what we do know of him, he had been a farmer and a horse trader. And reading his accounts and what was going on, he was there actually at the time. He was visiting a niece and nephew. He did. A lot of people brought an issue up that when they asked him, he could actually give the badge number for the trolley conductor on his way. Well, And people's like, oh, that's very convenient and odd. Once again, 1892. There are no cell phones. There are no television. There is no radio. Only thing that people really had as a distraction is either like parlor games or reading. So people paid a lot more attention in their day. And I don't think it's that odd that, taking this trolley, he noticed the conductor's number. I think that I do think that's just a lucky draw for him, and it did happen to be the man that was working. People's like, well, how did he remember the badge number? Well, the fact that he did remember the badge number, they confirmed that the guy was working, is a pretty good alibi. He was there, so and the relatives that confirmed they saw him that day. So around that time, so John Morris really is in the clear. Why did he show up? Was he maybe looking to borrow some money or something? Or trying to, from either from Andrew Borden possibly, or from one of his relatives? Was this some sort of business deal? We really don't know. So, but either way, it's got a very solid alibi that he was not there. He had left at least an hour before that Abby was murdered, and we know by the time that Andrew was killed, that he was visiting with relatives and nowhere to be seen, and so he's ruled out as well. I mean, I hear a lot about that, but he's ruled out now. And then, of course, there's all the speculation with Bridget Sullivan. I hear that one a lot. Oh, they had to be, the two women had to be in on this. She had to be part of, which is actually the plot of the 2018 movie Lizzie, with Chloe Sevigny, so that her and the maid were having some sort of lesbian affair, and I'm going to cover this stuff a little bit later, and that they hatched a murder plan. In all truth, if you read all of the testimony given in the court transcripts, or the inquest transcripts from Bridget, and from Lizzie, you do not get any sense that she had anything to do with it at all. Now, did she know? Was there something that she caught? Actually, from what I've read of what she said, I don't think so. I think that she was the one person that, if Lizzie's the murderer, and I think she is, that'd be the one wild card that she will make covered. And there is some evidence to that, because, and I will say this, the Elizabeth Montgomery movie, Legend of Lizzie Borden, except for her being naked, got a lot of their facts right. In fact, they used a lot of the court transcripts for that movie. And one thing that I did notice in, a couple things I noticed in Bridget Sullivan's testimony, one of them I'll bring up later, which is very interesting, was that, in this very detailed description she gave, she did say that on 2 occasions when she was cleaning those windows outside, Lizzie asked her, are you going to be outside washing the windows? She said yes. And she told her, you can lock the door if you want to. You can leave it unlocked if you want to, because I'm going to be out here. In other words, she'll see anybody that come in, or you can latch it if you want to. I can get water from the barn. And then later on, after she'd already started washing the windows, she said, are you still going to be out there? She actually come and asked her twice, how much longer going to be out there? Are you going to be there? So she was checking to see if she was going to be staying outside. And of course, Lizzie's alone in the house with Mrs. Borden. Why? So it seems like she's almost checking to make sure she's not going to get interrupted. Why else would she go ask her twice? Are you going to be outside? Are you going to be outside? You want me to latch the door? Are you still going to be outside? How much longer? Why was she worrying about this? What was she up to? And that also brings me to something else. I got a lot of questions, or saying, well, you're saying she wore the coat when she killed her father, but did she? What about with her mother? Well, here's the thing. The reason I never brought that up was because with the mother, from what we can tell from Bridget's testimony and even in Lizzie's testimony, is that Bridget was outside when they asked Bridget how long were you outside, she said she really hadn't looked at the clock. She wasn't really sure. But just from her description, and like I said, she gave a very good description of what she did and how many pails of water she used to wash the windows and how she washed the windows. Just reading that description, she went and got pumped water 4 times. So we can guess, and we know that she was in the house, and she said, "I know that I was there when Mr. Borden come home." So we know that we don't know how long she'd already been back in the house by that point, but we know that it seems like about an hour, at least 45 minutes minimum, to get 4 pails of water to scrub the front and back windows. Yeah, at least an hour, which would kind of make sense because she went out around 9 o'clock. She'd been back in the house maybe 10:15, and then he came home like 15, 20 minutes later. So that kind of fits the timeline. Well, that would give Lizzie an hour to kill her stepmother and then wash up. So an hour we don't have to worry about the time crunch. Whereas with Andrew, which is why I went over it, is why wasn't there blood on her from that? Because she had such a limited time. Once again, Bridget said that she went upstairs. That he got home about 20 minutes till 11. She went upstairs, lay down. She heard the bell strike, and just a few minutes later, she heard Lizzie call for her and say her father was dead. So Lizzie Hadley had about 15 to 20 minutes to commit that murder. There is a time crunch as far as the blood. How did she get that blood off? Kill him and get that blood off her that quick with her father? But with her mother, she had an hour. She could have been wearing her best dress and went up there and chopped her to death. She got an hour to go take the dress off and take a full bath if she wants. So there's not a time crunch there. There's not a time issue with the murder of the mother. However, I do think it's very interesting with the mother that she was alone with the house and she kept checking to see if Maggie was going to come in the house, or Bridget. They called her Maggie sometimes. If she was going to come back in the house, and kept asking her. And I think that the movie version they had on that with Elizabeth Montgomery, at least the timing, I think they got that right. Now, I've heard a lot of questions about, well, whatever happened to Bridget? Whatever happened to John Morse? Well, and especially with Bridget, did she ever confess to this? There was rumors that she confessed, that she said something. Well, there's a little bit of truth, or at least rumor, in that. It looks like, from what we do know, is that Bridget Sullivan, she was 25 at the time of the murders, and about 26 by the time of the trials was over. She did go back to Ireland. She was Irish, and she'd been there about 6 years already. She was like about 20, and so, but she went back to Ireland, but not for very long, because by 1897. She is, we know that she had returned to America, and had moved to Montana, out towards Butte, actually a town called Anaconda, and she was living there, and she basically lived out in Montana the rest of her life. She did end up marrying a man, ironically named John Sullivan, and she kept it the way she'd have to change her maiden name. So, and she pretty much lived a very quiet life. So we know she did do some domestic service for a judge in the town, was very well liked in the community, and she never talked about the Lizzie Borden case. Every now and then, people that knew her, mostly nieces and nephews, she never had any children of her own, would say that she would talk and tell stories and talk about a Lizzie who she had worked for. And apparently, from everything she said, she is very fond and liked both Lizzie and Emma. They got along quite well. These ladies were a bit older than her, but she seemed to have got along with them quite well. And she never talked about the murders. There is a story that a friend of hers, when she was very sick and dying, she called for her and to talk to her, and that she had said something to the effect of, "I helped out Lizzie in all that trial." But then when she talked about that was really, but she wouldn't say anything else about it. That was really kind of ambiguous, and when her friend asked about her the next day in the hospital, she's like, she didn't want to talk about it at all, and she said, please just drop it. I don't want to bring this up. And she lived, and she died in 1948, fairly ripe old age. I think it was in the late 60s. But what exactly did she mean? One, is this friend of hers telling the truth? You always have to question that, because she did tell it to a woman who's writing a book. And, what exactly did she mean when she said she helped her out? She didn't say she lied. She could have just meant, when I got up on she may have believed she was completely innocent and just told them, said, this is what I see. And she may have seen that as a help to her. Or maybe it could mean something else. We're never going to know. But personally, I don't think that from the timeline, the way things happen, it does look like Lizzie avoided her seeing or knowing anything. And it was very convenient that she was outside. We know she was outside for Abby's birth, so she didn't see that. And we know, and she was upstairs. And I think this was on purpose. She didn't want her involved. And so I really don't think that Bridget could give any more insight than she did on the stand at the time. I don't think that she knew any more than what she did already tell. I don't think she had any inside information. And there is no evidence of any type of affair between the two women. She did marry later on. Now, John Morris, he ended up in Iowa on a farm, become a farmer, lived a fairly quiet life, nothing eventful, and he passed away there. So really not much of a mystery there. And even though we hear all these stories, that it seems to be just that. It's just stories. And speaking of just stories, that's going to be the next topic I'm going to talk about. Because a lot of things I would hear, all of these different assertions about Lizzie Borden and things that she had done and things the family had done. Okay, I hate to break this to you, but a lot of those details, some of these stories you've heard are just that. They're stories. None of that was ever talked about, from what we can tell, till long after the murders, years after the murders. And it's created quite a few, in my opinion, created quite a few myths. In fact, no one knew much about the Bordens. They were seen as a respectable family. It's true that Andrew was seen as a little bit, tight on the dollar. And it was known the girls were misers. They had never married. Not misers, but were old maids. They had never married. But outside of that, there was no negative talk that we can tell. And people that lived contemporary said later, there was never really any talk about the Bordens. So it was only after these tragic murders, these horrible, grisly crimes, all of a sudden all of these weird stories started coming out. And that is just gossip and stories that got carried on. Now, a few of those that I'll mention is, like, for instance, that, there was incest in the family, that Andrew must have been doing things with his daughters. That's the reason they didn't marry. That's the reason there was such a violent attack. And I'm going to go over that one again too later. I heard the one story, and this was even seen in a couple of documentaries. It actually made it that far that Lizzie liked to kill animals, like she'd kill kittens and things and puppies, so that with her friends, so that she could have mock play funerals as a little girl. And also another one that's really commonly accepted is that she was a shoplifter. That one's very prevalent. You may notice I never mentioned it in any of my other two videos. Why? Because there's no real evidence for it. It was a rumor that came out. They even had that in the movie, in the Elizabeth Montgomery movie from the 70s. That and I've seen that in documentaries that she was a shoplifter. There's no evidence whatsoever that she's a shoplifter until like later on. So I'm going to cover all these. Now, for one, there's no record and there's no testament that Lizzie Borden ever killed animals to have these funerals. And this story wasn't told until way after the crimes. Nobody's really sure where it comes from. The incest thing, there was never any talk of any type of incest in the family. or any of that, and in the Victorian times, true, those type of things would not even be dreamed of, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence for it either. This is actually, and that theory didn't come out till many decades after the murders. Another one I'll talk about is, and this one I see in a lot of documentaries, is that the whole thing, and you notice I didn't say anything about it in either other videos, about the mutton stew, that they had this mutton, and then apparently they had it for like 3 or 4 days, and it had gone bad, and he still made them eat it, and they were all eating it, and that's probably why they all got sick that day. And it's true, Bridget says she was having some stomach problems, and everybody wasn't feeling very well. Food poisoning was very common in that age before refrigeration. However, that's not true. We know from some of the statements and the testimonies that yes, they did have the lamb, but it had been made the day before. And also, something that was in Bridget's testimony, she talked about putting things in the ice box. They had an ice box, so this would have kept overnight. And a day, even though it's warm, for it to go spoil, especially if they put it in an ice box, it's not going to give you food poisoning that easy. So that's purely a rumor. That is not. It's not true. And like I said, I've seen a lot of documentaries, which once again, you can always trust documentaries. So a lot of these rumors, and I'm going to be going over that a little bit later as well. Now, here I'd like to talk about the mysteries of the case to me. Now, I don't want it to make it sound like, and maybe I give that impression over the last 2 videos, that I have this all completely figured out. Well, obviously not. It's still a mystery. I've given my opinion and my conclusions based on logic, based on looking at the timelines, based on looking, at the what circumstantial evidence exists, and it all still does point to Lizzie Borden. But there are still, and though with me, the mystery is not so much did she do it. I'm convinced she did it. Probably like 98% convinced she did it. But the question is how she did it, whether or not she did it, is not the mystery for me. The mystery for me is, why did she do it on that day, and why did she do it the way that she did it? A lot of that, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. For one, on this particular, what made her on this particular day, one, to kill her parents? Number 2, why did she go about it the way that she did it? It seems very complicated and seems almost compulsive and very risky. I mean, we're talking about she's home, she's home with the maid and her mother. They're in the house, and she kills her mother with the maid just outside the house, who's going to be coming back in the house, and she doesn't know who's going to come home. How does she know that the maid's not going to go up into that room? She's the maid. She cleans up. How's she not going to find that body dead and knowing that Lizzie's the only one in the house? So that doesn't seem like a planned death. That seems something spontaneous and compulsive. And as well as that, with her father coming home, why kill him in this way? Why not kill them in the night? Make it look like, throw a window open, make it look like a burglary. People would have bought that, and she wouldn't be suspected. Also, why didn't you frame Bridget for this? She's right there. She was Irish. There was a big prejudice against Irish in Fall River. So people would have definitely, it's Victorian times, they definitely took her word over Bridget's. If she did, all she had to do is say Bridget did it, and nobody would have questioned it. She'd have been arrested, but she didn't. She actually said Bridget wasn't around. So, this is a very bizarre, very risky, and doesn't seem like a very well-timed plan. So, kill your mother and leave her laying on the floor. Maid's wandering around the house. Your father comes home. Maid's still there, and then you hack your father to death. This is a very bizarre. I think she did it. Probably she did it. Why did she do it this way? Well, I can only speculate on some things. Once again, going by the evidence. But I'll never know exactly, nobody's ever going to know exactly what her original plan was. And if this is, and what made her decide to do it that day and what prompted it that day. And I say the original plan because I don't think that the first part of this was planned. I think she did plan to do this. I think that was already worked out in her head. But what set her off to do it then and the way she did it, we're never going to know. Only people who are going to know that are going to be Abby and Lizzie, and they're both dead. So, and we're never going to know. All I can do is speculate. For one, I think that something happened. Something was said, something that caused her to move into action. And from there, she had to improvise a plan. That's what I think happened. Now, what that was, we'll never know. She was not fond of her stepmother. She stopped calling her mother years before, called her Mrs. Borden over a dispute over some property. She did not like her. She obviously saw her as a threat. So, I'm sure there was some tension between the two women. Once again, I'm just speculating. But, I really would like to have known what happened. And in fact, everybody's like, oh, I wonder what secret Bridget took with her, what she saw, what was she part of it? I don't think she was part of it, but what I would love to have asked Bridget, if I got to sit down and talk to her, it's like, tell me about what kind of relationships was going on in that house. How did the girls get along with Abby? How did they get along with her father? How did Abby and Andrew get along? How did he get along with his daughters? What was the intrigue? What was it like in that house? What was the relationships like in that household? That, I think, would have been gold to know. And Bridget, living there, working there for several years, she would have known all that. That's what I would have asked, hey, did you see her do it? No, I don't think she had a thing to do with it. But I would have loved the insight she would have had into the operations and the relationships and the dynamic between these people would be gold to know. And unfortunately, she took it to the grave with her as well. But now, as part of that, I would ask this question: is that why did she pick that day to do this? I think it's very. I think that it appears that it was something she had planned on doing. There was the whole thing with the poison that she tried to buy some prussic acid the day before, which is highly poisonous. Said she wanted to use it on a sealskin cape, which that seems very. And they wouldn't give it to her because it is deadly poison. And some statements she had made that she was afraid something was going to happen in the house. That may have been trying to get a cover up, kind of set up an alibi, set up a story. So I do think that this was something she had planned to do, and that she had thought about quite a bit. But why did she decide to do it that particular day? The only thing I can speculate and say is that I think that it was opportunity. And a perfect storm of the situation. For one, that is a narrow house. It's like less than 20 feet wide, 3 stories, no doorways, and there are 4 people living in that house. So, 5 people technically, 5 with the maid. So you have 5 people living in that house. There's not a lot of privacy, and these 3 women in the house. It would probably been being alone with someone, catching someone alone, was probably kind of a hard thing. Well, with Bridget outside, her father gone, this was an opportunity. She was actually alone with her mother, and it may have been, now or never type of deal. Also, the fact that her sister was out of town, I think, is a major component, as well as that her uncle had come to visit. I think these 2 elements is what made her decide that I'm doing this today. Because one, it takes her sister out of town and gives her an alibi, and her sister will not be suspected, 1. And 2, if her sister didn't know about it, and we'll talk about that in a second, then that eliminates somebody that might have tried to talk her out of it. Or maybe even turn her in. You don't know. We'll never know. So, in fact, but now, and it is true that Emma, until her dying day, even though her and Lizzie had a falling out, didn't speak for like 30 years, she still defended her sister and said that she didn't do it. So that's one. She's got them out. And also the fact that her Uncle Morris is there. That's another man in the house. So, in this type of grisly crime, she was a smart woman. She was a smart Victorian woman. She knew that she would not be suspected as long as there was a male suspect. I think that she thought, well, he's there, my sister's gone, and Morris is here. And I'm not going to be suspected. I'm going to be alone with my mom, my stepmom. This is the perfect day to do this. I think that I'll never know. Only Lizzie knows, and she's been gone a long time now. But that's my speculation. I think that she thought it's now or never. This is a perfect setup, or as good as it's going to get. Now, but still, it is so risky. You know, she chopped her, even though Bridget couldn't see what was going on. And people said, well, how didn't she see through the window? Actually, Bridget's testimony gives a lot of clues for that. Well, because, once again, Bridget gave a lot of detail of what she was doing, you know, when she's outside washing the windows. And she says she washed all of the bottom windows first, not the top windows. And her mother was killed on the top floor. So there's no way she could have seen it. Everybody's like, well, how did she clean the window? Wouldn't she be looking around at the murder? No, she wasn't. The mother was killed around 9:30 in the morning. At that time, she was drawing water and cleaning the outside windows on the first floor. So she couldn't have seen it. We know that from her own testimony. But still, it is so risky. The maid, it's like I said, it's the maid. What keeps her from going upstairs and discovering this body and go screaming? Well, actually, once again, Bridget's testimony answers that. And I actually was after this question was brought to me, I started thinking about it, and I remember something she said. When the prosecutor asked what her duties were, she said that her duties did not include did not include cleaning the bedrooms, only her own bedroom. That she said they did that themselves, meaning Abby, Emma, and Lizzie. So Lizzie would have, therefore, right there in her own testimony, Lizzie would have known she was never going to go in that bedroom. That was not her job. And apparently, they didn't want her up there. You know, they didn't want her up there making the bed. So apparently, they didn't want her. Maybe they were afraid a maid might steal or whatever. We'll never know why. But they did not want her in the bedrooms. And Lizzie knew that. So Lizzie knew good and well that if she killed her mother in the bedrooms, Bridget was never going to go in there. That's the reason when her father come home, she gave the lie that her mother went out. And that's the reason Bridget didn't question it, because Bridget never went upstairs to the bedrooms. It's right in the testimony, as you see. Yeah, so right there shows, and then it shows another thing. If you live in any house, people speculate, oh, she couldn't have done this, couldn't have done that. Okay, you know, how could she hide the weapon? Okay, think about your own house. I'm thinking about mine here. I know the routine of this house. I know what time my fiance is going to get up. I know what time she's going to take the dog out. I know what time I'm going to get home. Hell, even the dog knows that. He's waiting for me by the door. So when you live in a house, like in your own house, you know the routine. You know what goes on. And I think, and nobody's going to know that house like that. People come later as investigators. They don't know that house the way Lizzie would have known that house and its routine. Just like with Bridget, she knew Bridget was never going to go up into those bedrooms. So she knew she wasn't going to discover the bodies until her father come home. And, you know, and as far as hiding the weapon, I can sit here and think of at least 5 places in my house I could hide something, nobody would ever find it. Loose board, underneath a cabinet. There's, you know, and as we say with police, they're not very inept at searching as they showed, and she may have even known that. This was an intelligent woman. Everyone says that she was intelligent. So she knew the routine of that house. Now, why she decided to kill her mother and leave her on the floor like that, I think that was sort of a set-off thing. I think she planned to kill her, but I don't think she planned to kill her like that. I think that was thrown her off a little bit, her plan. And another thing that I think threw her off in her plan, whatever that plan was when her father come home early. They all said she'd come home early. And of course, the first thing he asked was, "Where's Mrs. Borden?" So she had to make this impromptu lie. I think that was a flaw in the slaw of her plan. I think she killed her mother upstairs. She's going to wait for her father to come home and kill him. And for whatever reason, when he come home early, that messed it up. She had to make up this lie, and she had to make up this lie in front of the maid. Well, she got a sick note and she went out. In fact, she told that both to her father and to Bridget. So, whatever the plan was, I think that the father threw that off, and that's why we had that lie. So that's the way I think that she did it. She knew that Bridget wasn't going to come in that room. She killed her with the axe. She didn't leave her laying there. No worry, the maid's not going to go upstairs and see her. And then whatever her plan was to kill her father, that's the question. And also the fact that perhaps she knew that Bridget would take a nap every day. That's something I would like to have asked Bridget. You went upstairs to take a nap. Was that a common thing? Did you go take a nap just before lunch? Was that a common thing for you to do every day? I would have loved to have known that. If I'd known that would answer it all. That would have showed the plan. She could kill her father upstairs, knowing Bridget would never go upstairs, and she'd know that that Bridget would go lay down, and we know it was a common thing for her father to lay down before lunch. So right there, she would have known she'd have that moment alone with him. That Bridget was never going to go in those bedrooms. She used the back stairs up to her room, and it's a servant. She's a servant. She used the servant's stairwell, and she was safe to kill the mother. And when her father come home, she knew that Bridget would be upstairs and she'd be alone with him. So I do think that was the plan. Which only thing I wish I knew is, like I said, did Bridget take a nap like that every day? Was that part of the routine? I think Lizzie Borden used this routine to get away with this murder, to commit and get away with this murder. Now, another question that I got on the people that lived in that house was about Emma. Not about whether she did it, but was she in on it? Was there collusion? Was she aware of what her sister was going to do? And did they plan for her to be out of town that day for her to commit this murder? Truth is, we'll never know. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. And the only two people that would know that are both long gone. Only thing to do is speculate once again, and I've thought about it a lot, and it is convenient that she happened to go out of town that day, and that her uncle showed up at that time. I think that's just maybe a little bit too much of a coincidence. But if Emma knew about it, then, or at least collusion, not so much conspiracy, but maybe collusion, maybe she knew she did it, but it was a don't ask, don't tell thing. We're never going to know. Is it possible? Yeah, I think it's possible. Now, all I can say is that Emma stuck by her sister through it all, believed in her innocence, and professed her innocence even after they had a falling out 30 years. So, if it was an act on Emma's from Emma's point, then she did a damn good job. But the truth is, is it possible? Yeah, it is possible. Do I think it's possible? I don't think there's enough information to really make a verdict on that, or even an educated guess. Yes, it's possible that she knew about it, and that they may have conspired it together, or it may have just been, kind of a silent, "I'll go out of town this week." Okay, sis. Okay. And they both know exactly what's going to go down. Uncle's coming, and I'm going to go out of town. Okay. Okay. May have been like that, and that just some things just don't need to be spoken to be known, and that may have been the case. We'll never. Now, the last thing, and I do mean the last thing, I want to talk about with Lizzie Borden is something that I find a little bit fascinating, and that's actually the sociology in this case with Lizzie Borden. Now, this kind of harkens back to the rumors about Lizzie and the speculations about Lizzie. Like for instance, was there incest in the family? Was there a lesbian affair in the between Lizzie and Bridget? Did she torture animals? Did she shoplift? All of these things. They harken back to something that I want you to kind of pay attention to whenever you're watching documentaries or movies about Lizzie Borden, because the fact is, we know very little about the private lives of the Bordens and about the private lives or the motivations of Lizzie Borden. She was very tight-lipped on that. In her older age, she was, because everyone assumes she's guilty. She's very closed-mouthed, pretty much stayed to herself. She loved her animals. She did have some friends, but she never talked about the murders. That was never brought up. And she was a very private person after that. You can't really blame her. But because of that, Lizzie Borden has kind of become a blank slate. And when I said by which people can project any ideal that they want on her, and that has happened time and time again. Any type of even political viewpoint on Lizzie Borden, she becomes a poster girl for a lot of different issues, especially issues surrounding feminism and women. For instance, during the time that was going on, she got a lot of support from the suffragette movement, the women's rights to vote movement. They saw this, they're persecuting a woman, they're using her as a scapegoat. Women have been used by men and all of this. They're trying to pass off this murder. So they really used her as a poster girl for men oppressing women, and keeping us from the vote and the legal process. So she became this suffragette hero. And that was even during her lifetime, during the trials. Of course, they abandoned her right after. But as you get on later on into like the 1960s, and suddenly she became, 60s and the 70s, she gets to be a symbol for, an ambitious woman, for a woman that took charge. She was in a bad situation. She had a miserly father. She was under this oppressive system, and even though radical and maybe not moralistic, this was a woman that did what she had to do to get her own financial and social liberation. And she became this poster girl for the women for the 1960s and 70s women's rights movement. Okay, and in fact, you see that especially in the Legend for Lizzie Borden. They kind of showed that this was a woman taking charge in an oppressive patriarchal society. Then, of course, when you get into this was also kind of hinted at in the Legend of Lizzie Borden, but in the 80s the 80s and 90s it became a big time speculation, was that maybe there was some. This was the time period in the late 70s and in the 80s where we had a lot of child abductions and then a lot of child molestations, like with the priesthood, and all this child molestation and incest had become really to the forefront socially. It was a hot button topic. Well, all of a sudden, maybe reason Lizzie hacked in his face and hacked his eye in half, because that was the eye that may have seen her in some compromised situation or some shameful situation, and that's the reason for her rage. So suddenly, Lizzie becomes an abused child striking out. And then of course, you get on up also in the 90s and getting on up into the present time. This is a time that a lot of gay rights, LGBTQT issues are coming up, and gay rights. Suddenly, you get a lot of these stories of that Lizzie was probably a lesbian. Her sister. The reason her sister moved out was because she because she was having lesbian affairs, and that people really speculate. And you see that in the movie Lizzie, by which her and Bridget are having the affair, and that's where these rumors and these stories come from. That Lizzie was having an affair. There was incest between her and her father. And also that she was a shoplifter. That's one I didn't go over. There was actually that she was a shoplifter. You always hear that one. Actually, there's no evidence she was a shoplifter. There was an incident. I'll just say this real quick. There was an incident about in 1897, several years after the murders and her acquittal, by which she gave a gift of a plate to a friend. The plate got damaged. She took it back to the store where Lizzie got it to be repaired, and they claimed, we had 2 plates that were shoplifted, that were stolen from here. So they had put a warrant out for Lizzie's arrest. But when they talked to Lizzie's like, no, I went in there and I paid for them. And apparently, and the store dropped the charges. They dropped the whole thing. Either Lizzie went ahead and paid for it, or may have been a clerical error. Maybe the guy just didn't record that it was that he had sold it, and there was this mistake made. Either way, the whole thing was dropped. But the papers got a hold of it, and all of a sudden, Lizzie was a shoplifter. She is a shop thief. I've seen this in documentaries. No evidence for this at all, except for this plate incident, which nobody pursued, and apparently was taken care of. So there is no evidence for this. And that's the type of things I say. But you see it in the movies, you see in these documentaries that she was a thief. But anyway, as I was saying, back to the thing, the whole thing with Lizzie, possibly being lesbian, and also like in the Lizzie movie with Chloe Sevigny, you see that she is really emphasized that she is a woman. A woman that's being taken advantage of through institutional misogyny, and assault, when men just assaulting women. There's a scene where Uncle tries to sexually assault her in the hallway, and there's nothing she can do about it. So once again, it's back to this oppressive men and sexually assaulting men, and the powerlessness of women, and that she took back that power violently from being assaulted. And this comes right at the same time we're having all these issues with the accusations coming out through the Me Too movement. And suddenly Lizzie is a poster girl for the Me Too movement. So every single social issue of the times, they put on Lizzie Borden. So whenever you hear some of these stories or some of these theories or some of these movies and documentaries, look at the times that they were made, the documentaries or the movies, and what was the social hot buttons at the time. And you will find that they've put these. Suddenly, Lizzie Borden has become the poster girl for every feminist and every chauvinistic movement that's out there. She has become not even a person but a symbol for all of these issues, and I find that very interesting. Now, do I think that any of these reflect the real Lizzie Borden? Not really. I mean, once again, Lizzie Borden was a very private person, so we can only go by her actions both before and after, and the era she lived in. For one, she was, from all reports and people that knew her, she was a very calculating person. She was a very very stern person. But she also, it was known that, like her father, she did know to be rather arrogant, and she had a temper. When she was younger, a little bit fiery. That was one. Two, she was also very big into prim and proper, like a typical Victorian woman of the time. She taught Sunday school. She did all the things that a woman in her position that wasn't married would do. So she seems very. There's no evidence she ever got involved in the suffragette movement during her lifetime. She seems to have enjoyed pretty things and nice things. In fact, after the murders, she bought the big nice house. She changed her name to Elizabeth of Maplecroft, which a lot of people thought was very both conceited and pretentious as hell, and I agree with them. So and she bought the best clothes. She bought the best furniture and furniture her house. She had a coachman. She had servants, a winter bedroom, a summer bedroom, a library. So what does these things tell us about Lizzie Borden? That Lizzie Borden was a Victorian woman who was considered an old maid for her time. She got involved in the social things she could get involved with, and she wanted the good life. She wanted pretty things. She wanted a nice house. She wanted the accoutrements of wealth. And I don't think her motive had anything to do with incest or being a lesbian or being trying to stick it to the man type of thing. I think they say, when it comes to murder, follow the money. And one of the number one motives, and I think that was it. She wanted the life of accoutrements and wealth. And the person that was standing in the way of her getting that was her stepmother and her father, and they were both put out of the way. So she could have Maplecroft. So she could become Elizabeth instead of Lizzie. And her legal name was Lizzie. And that she could have that social standing that she wanted to get. She wanted to be a person up on the hill and in the society, in the upper crust society. Those are her motives. I don't see any social, any sexual or social or political motive in what she did whatsoever. But yet she has become the poster girl for all these movements. I find that as almost as interesting as the murders. Now, the last of these rumors and these speculations I'll go over is the one about whether or not Lizzie was a lesbian. And I don't know if she was a lesbian or not. Now, it is true that she never did marry. She doesn't seem to have ever had a boyfriend, and in today's world that would be suspect. But that's in today's world, not in the Victorian era. Back then, if a woman didn't marry to a certain age, she didn't marry, and that was the way it was in her, in her time. She was a woman from a good family. She missed her opportunities to get married probably because of where she lived, and she wasn't in with the society, and she was expected to marry a man of a certain status that didn't ever come along. Both her and her sister. And I think that's very telling. It's not just, if it just be one, you'd be like, well, maybe she wasn't interested in men. But both the sisters, and they're both old maids, that says to me there's something socioeconomic going on, not something as far as attraction and sexual. So I don't see any evidence that she was lesbian. That's been pointed out that when her sister moved out, she went to a reverend to talk about what was going on. And the reverend said, you must, with this type of situation, you must leave immediately. He treated it because, that this, they didn't say what it was, but it was very important that she immediately get out of that house and get out of that influence of what was going on. So obviously something very scandalous. A lot of people have read that into that maybe Emma caught Lizzie in some sort of sexual affair, and that she went to the pastor and she was told him, you got to get out of there. That is more of an interpretation from our age, from our time, not Victorian times. In Victorian times, there are many things that today we would see as nothing, below nothing, not even an issue, that they'd have found horribly scandalous. So that reaction could be something much more benign. For instance, and more likely, we do know that Lizzie, after, she couldn't get friends or have friends. All of her friends abandoned her in the town. After she was acquitted, everybody assumed she's murdered, and she's blacklisted, ostracized from the town the rest of her life. So she went out of town. She commonly went and she loved to go to the theater. She loved the theater. So she'd go to the theater to see these plays in Boston. And she made friends with the troops. Apparently, she was much more forgiving, or not as judgmental, and she made friends with with the theater people, the actors and theater troops, and she would invite them back over to the house, to her house for parties. And there's one named Nance O'Neill who actually lived up to be in some of the even the talkie films, who she became very close friends with. Now, it was rumored that Nance O'Neill was possibly lesbian, but now, does that mean that we don't know if her and Lizzie had some sort of relationship, or if it's just a friendship? But when you consider at that time, actors and theater people were seen socially, especially in a town like Fall River, as being equivalent to prostitutes and thieves. They were the most low life. You did not good Christian girls, good Victorian women did not associate with such people. It's always right to go to the theater, but you didn't invite them to your house. Oh my God! So she could have just as easily, rather than saying a lesbian thing, she could just as easily went into the preacher and said, "She keeps bringing these theater people into the house, and they're serving drinks to them." And he'd be like, "You've got to get out of there." That's just as legitimate as if you're saying that there's some sort of lesbian thing. And I think that, considering the situation, it's probably something more like that. We've got to be careful about applying sensibilities of today to sensibilities in over well over 100 years ago in the Victorian era. They're wholly different things. So I think that this could just likely been she got tired of the publicity. Lizzie, this was only within like 10, 15 years, was 1902, 1903 when she left. So the crime was still fresh in people's minds. She was still notorious. I'm sure there were still reporters coming around, people coming to gawk at them. Plus, she's bringing home theater people. I think that Emma's like, I can't handle this, and I'd like to have a little bit of a private life, and she left. And they had a split. I think that's just as legitimate as some sort of her being a lesbian. Was she a lesbian? I have no idea, but I don't think there's any evidence saying that she was, that we know of. All right, folks, that's it. I'm done with Lizzie Borden. That is once and for all I've got to say for Lizzie Borden. No more videos. And I hope you have enjoyed this video as well as the other two on. If you want to, I'll give a link. You can go back and see the other two videos I did on this. And hey, if you're enjoying my channel and listen to what comes out of my head, I'd really appreciate you go over and give me a like or give me a subscribe. I'd love to still keep the conversation going about Lizzie Borden. So, until next time, later.